While we wait for the Jeep to come back from Mike's Off-Road, as they're doing their checks and doing a couple of steering things for us, we have some stuff that we can do to prepare for the wiring. I've got a bunch of electronics to do when we get it back. That's sort of the last step. We've got a couple little housekeeping items to do, but we have about 4 days left, and we'd like to be done maybe by Saturday so we can leave on Monday and then have Sunday to sort of get prepared. So crunch time is here, definitely. Michelle is actually in the house working on some rally stuff, getting things situated there, so I'm out here doing the wiring. The first thing I'm going to do is pre-wire our seat heater switches. We're putting in seat heaters, or we put in seat heaters in our Mastercraft seats, ordered them that way, and lumbar support. Cold in Montana, it'll be cold during the rally, so that added comfort will really make a difference. So we have to put them in the console because this is the best place for them. And it's a perfect place for them because then you can just hit them right there. I need to run wiring underneath the console from underneath the seat, so I've actually already notched with my Dremel tool on both sides. The switches themselves are cool little square switches that are perfectly suited for this application. And we need a 13/16 inch hole, so we're going to use the unibit. So I'm going to drill a pilot hole. I've already marked out where I want them. I'm going to drill a pilot hole for each, then get out the unibit, get these things drilled out, and get them installed. When drilling these kind of holes with a unibit, one thing I like to do, the unibits actually have stepped, and that's why they're called a stepper bit, but they have stepped cutters that go all the way up, and I think the end result is a 1 inch with this, which we don't want to get all the way to. One thing that I like to do is actually mark which step that I want to stop, which cutter I want to stop, because that's how I know how big the hole's going to get. If I'm fortunate, and we are now, we have a little guideline. This is the nut that holds the switch in. So we can actually put this over and get an idea of where we want to stop. This gives us a guideline for the first pass, and then we can always hog it out a little bit more so that we can get the switch in. With a switch, you have to be careful to make sure that you don't cut it, because then the switch won't fit. You're into epoxy and all that stuff, especially in metal. It's, you know, measure twice, cut once kind of a thing. So I'm going to mark this right here, recheck it. This should give me a pretty good approximation of how deep that switch needs to be. I'm going a little bit shallow, so I may stop early just to see where we're at and make sure the switch fits. Sometimes what can happen when you drill your pilot holes is you realize, just like this, that the pilot hole didn't go perfectly centered. That's okay, because we can make up for it here by drilling in a little bit at an angle. I've already marked an approximation of where that hole needs to be in terms of the step bit, and so that'll give me a guideline as to where to put these, because I want these switches lined up. I want them to look good, and so we're going to go ahead and we'll use that as a guideline and adjust as we go. Perfect. And again, I like to err on the side of caution, do a little bit at a time so we don't overcut, but that will fit perfectly, and it's pretty much centered right on our line. So we'll take that out, do the other one. All right, we got the other one cut, good to go. I'll get this thing wired up. You have to excuse the messy table. I actually have all my lights, the light bars and all the LED lights from Black Oak LED, which are freaking awesome, by the way. Continue to talk about those. So I'm sort of working on a bunch of different projects at the same time as I get this stuff ready. So what I need to do is we have a couple of harnesses, one for each seat. I have the 12-volt side, which basically needs to run up into my fuse panel. I'm gonna run a separate ignition switch fuse panel for all my interior accessories because we're adding several lights. We're adding 2 seat heaters. We have a scanner slash radar detector. We have the new rally trip computer, and I have a CB probably going in. So I'm going to run a separate panel so we can tap into these things and we can get a switched relay. The Jeep, one of the things about the Jeep is it doesn't have a very good ignition source. So everything runs through a different system, and it's not real easy to grab a 12-volt source that will handle all this kind of power. And so most things that they want you to do is go right to the battery. The problem is if you forget to turn that off, seat heater gets hit on the way out of the vehicle, well, you're screwed the next morning because you've now left your seat heaters on all night, and even with a good Optima battery, it's not going to last all night at 30 amps or however much these things draw. And so I'm going to tap into a 12-volt source that I think is going to be for the sub. That's what I'm waiting to get the Jeep back until I get that. But it's a 20-amp circuit. I'll use it to fire a big relay, and the relay will then turn on the power basically for all these other devices. So I'll be able to run the relay. I may run more than one, but that's what the plan is. So we'll see how this goes. On these 3-prong switches, I had to Google this because there's no wiring diagram, but basically you have 1, 2, and 3 prongs, and number 1 is for power, number 2 is for the accessory, the line going to the seat heater in this case, and number 3 is ground. So we know that we have red, which is positive, black, which is ground, and yellow is going to the seat heater. So I threaded up through, I put a piece of tape on it to indicate whether it was a driver's or passenger side. And then I've got all the wires stuffed underneath here, and I'll just pick all that stuff up and carry it whenever I get ready to install it. You want to remember to put the nut through the wiring before you get ready to put this on, so which I actually didn't do. So I'll put that on the other side of the console. Put this on the wiring, thread those through. Drop the switch in here. This is the driver's side. This is the front of the console. I'm going to run these through, get the connections made. It's a plastic nut, so you don't want to get them too tight, but we don't want it moving around, so I'm going to use just a small crescent wrench to get that just a little bit more snug than I can get with my fingers. One note, which I'll show you in a second, is these connectors are sort of a 90-degree shape. So I think what I want to do is make sure that I don't point those the same direction. I may point the other one for the other seat because that's the wiring can come up here and go down. I'll secure all this wiring inside here so that I can make it look nice and keep everything out of the way. The emergency brake runs through part of this. The transfer case lever is in here, and so you want to keep everything nice and clean. So there's the first one. It'll face this way, off and on. Okay, so they're all tightened up. They're installed, everything's drilled out, they match, they look good, looks pretty factory actually. So once the Jeep gets back, we'll get it all wired up and we'll be good. A lot of times when I'm doing wiring, one of the things I like to do is actually bench test everything. So that's why I have this huge mess of wires right here. We're installing this cool custom switch panel from 12voltunlimited.com. Matt did an awesome job. These are really cool. And so, and I also want to grab the ignition power but not run everything through that small wire. So I have this fuse block here, and then I've put a relay in between those two things. So the relay will basically act like a large buffer or a switch, which is sort of what a relay does. It's a 30-amp relay, so it will handle some decent power as it goes through. But what I've done is I'm trying to figure out how to take the existing switches from Black Oak, which we're not going to use, which are these lighted, really cool switches actually. They're a lighted switch, but we're not going to use them, so over there. So there are these cool lighted switches that come on and off, and they're all waterproof and everything, which we don't really need in the Jeep in terms of where they're going to be located. But there's 3 wires to them, which actually go to their own relay. So they have we have a secondary relay. So what I needed to do is figure out how to fire that relay from our existing relay and get everything to work together. So I've hooked up one of our little spotlights, and these will be mounted, I can't remember which one this is, spot or flood, but one will be mounted on the cowl and the other will be mounted on the front. So I wanted to see if everything would work, so I got everything hooked up, and so this is my spotlight circuit, and it's not working. Oh, there we go. So, wow, that's bright. What we have is a little red light to indicate that they're on. And I've just got some loose wires, so that's why it wasn't working. So, wow. And so that works. So I bench tested it. Now I can draw this stuff out so I can follow it once I get to the Jeep and get ready to plug all them in. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tie all the lights in together on this fuse panel and fuse them individually, but then fire everything together. So we should be good to go with that. And each one has their own fuse. So we sort of have this multitude of relays and fuses and all of that. So everything should be protected, be able to handle the power, and we'll be good. Hey guys, I'm out here by myself again while Michelle is working on rally stuff. There's some stuff I need to do that she doesn't necessarily need to be here for, so you get a little bit more from me. We just got the Jeep back from Mike's Off-Road here in Bozeman, Montana, and they did a great job. They basically just went through everything for me to verify that we installed the suspension correctly, made some adjustments, got the alignment done, lined up the differentials, and surprisingly enough, we actually did a very good job installing this system, which was surprising actually that we didn't screw anything up. The only issues they had were some issues that were actually by design that we corrected in order to make it a better on-road and off-road vehicle. So first thing I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna get this roof rack installed. The girls obviously have a lot of stuff to put in this Jeep. We're gonna try to maximize all the space we can. We're using a roof rack for the lightweight items. We're gonna keep things pretty low so we don't affect the center of gravity and we don't put too much weight on there. So I've just got this, this simple roof rack we're gonna put on top and get it going. For this Jeep, because we're not using one specifically made for the Jeep, most of these racks are actually designed to go on the OEM racks, which the Jeep does not have. We are not putting enough weight on there that we need full cage wrap, you know, anything like that. We're not putting a spare tire up here or anything. So I am basically going to use these aluminum straps, which I've already painted black so they look good and match. And we're going to go through the roof and get those tied down. That should hold everything in place and get that securely mounted. These fiberglass hard stops are pretty thin, so I can just use one of these along with an acorn nut, so it'll look nice. One of the things I will do is add a little dab of RTV or some other sort of silicone in order to seal that top so that the water doesn't drip down inside the cab. Hey guys, today is a Hakuna Matata kind of day. No worries, we got a couple of days here to finish. I'm actually trying to get most everything done today, so we have some time to do some other stuff tomorrow, and then we have one more day after that to get packed and on the road. So today I've been working on some wiring stuff. In particular right now I'm trying to get everything mounted so then I can wire to them. So we ended up putting the light bar in last night just to temporarily get it situated. We've got our front spotlights, and they're not mounted completely, but then we have, we'll end up with some floodlights up front, and then we have a 20-inch light bar that's going to go on the cowl. I've already pulled the cowl off. The nice thing about these Jeeps is six little screws, and the cowl comes off, and a perfect place to run wiring. So we'll run these out, and I'll have it zip tied to this to this hinge and be able to get it down underneath, run everything together. For the light bar, I'm going to run it down the bracket itself. I ended up stripping some of the rubber plastic wire loom stuff that they put on there because I didn't like how it looked, and it was too thick to go underneath the bracket. So I managed to just run that through. We're going to get all this stuff buttoned up. What I'm going to do first is get all the lights mounted and in place, and then I'll wire to them. Putting in our black oak floodlights in these cubes. These have 4 ultra bright LEDs in the front of them, so we're going to put those up here on the bull bar, and that'll give us plenty of light up front in addition to all the other lights that we have up here. Because the mounting holes are pretty big, I'm actually going to throw in a couple of large washers to make sure that everything stays where it needs to be. We have a 20-inch light bar that's going to go on the cowl, and we already got in, tested it, make sure it's not in the way, not too distracting, you can see everything. So I'm going to mark in the middle and get this thing installed. You know, throughout this project, we've talked a little bit about quality of design, and one of the things that you get with this high quality stuff is good design. So for example, the bracket has an inset in order to put the nut in, and it's well designed. This is an 11mm socket, standard socket, and you don't have any problems. It fits exactly inside this opening. So someone had the forethought to actually mount that, create this mount in such a way that this fits in, but you still have a recess, so when you look at it head on, you don't see a big bolt sticking out. I'm kind of an engineering kind of a guy. I'm not an engineer by any means, but I like good design and things that are well thought out. Here's what I've got so far. I have these mounted. I need to secure this stuff with a zip tie, get that all cleaned up. Everything else is all cleaned up and run. I notched a piece of the cowl just below where the cowl meets the hood so I can run the wires down into the engine compartment. That way they're not quite as stressed. This is a great area here where the motor for the wipers is. Wipers are, and you can run wires in here. There's plenty of room. Just make sure you secure everything so you keep it out of the wiper arms and everything. But the moment of truth, basically, I need to determine whether or not I have to trim the actual cowl itself or whether it will go ahead and absorb those. There's some rubber here, so I'm not sure if it will absorb these wires or not. I'm about to find that out. So you can see I've got my winch controller opened up. I'm currently doing a little bit of testing. In addition to the cool custom switch panel, we actually got this winch controller also, which allows us to control the winch from inside, which is cool without having a long cord, which is the same. So what I want to do is be able to tap into the controller so that we can control it from the remote control hand, or actually with the switch from inside. That way people outside the vehicle or the driver can control it. So we have an on-off switch, safety, and then in and out, easy, out and in, easy peasy. So with the Warren winch, the new ones, the old ones used to be a 3-wire. The new ones are a 5-wire, which basically ends up with 2 grounds. So you have a switched ground side and you have a switched hot side, which means you need a double pole, double throw switch. Well, unfortunately, this is not. This is a single pole switch. So what you end up having to do is actually just ground the other half of that all the time. So rather than have an open ground, you close that ground and then it works just like the old school 3-wire controllers that they have. And so not a big deal. That's easy to do. So I did my testing, everything works the way I want. I wrote down the diagram, and now all I need to do is tap into these wires so that I can use both of them and then run the wires in. Wiring can be a tedious process, so I'm not going to show you every single thing that I'm doing. We don't need to montage 40 hours worth of wiring, but I wanted to show you a couple of things as I go along. We were trying to figure out, we have a custom winch panel, as we said, switch panel. We were trying to figure out where to put it, and lo and behold, we looked, and there was a perfect spot down on the console. This sits like this. This is the transfer case, gear shift. So that required me to modify this console. And so what I did was I cut a 2.5 by 2.5 inch hole. This is a 3 by 3 inch panel. Mounted it in. I had some issues because with the 2.5 by 2.5 inch hole, we ended up with some of the bolts were just barely able to get any metal. So I added a couple of washers. That gave us some bite on that, and now everything is secure and ready to go. So we have safety switch on, in, and out with the winch. So that'll be perfect. That's a perfect location, easy to see, easy to use. These are another light that we got from Black Oak LED. These are rock crawler lights designed to light up the ground around you if you're rock crawling at night, so you can see what you're doing. And which in our case, that's really important because it gets dark here in the wintertime, in the fall, and late spring at like 3:30 in the afternoon. So these will be great. We actually have 8 of them, so I'm going to be doing 3 on each side and 1 in the front and 1 in the back, and that should give us plenty of light underneath the vehicle. The kit actually comes with nuts and bolts, really nice ones, but in this case, the way that things are underneath this Jeep, the easiest way is just going to be to use some self-tapping screws, get them mounted, and then we'll let them all hang down, and then we'll pull all the wiring where it needs to be. These are low draw. So we'll just run it straight to the switch and be able to turn them on and off pretty easily. Hey guys, it is crunch day here, our final day of the build. We leave on Monday. Today is Saturday morning. I am just finishing up the wiring. Then I have a couple other things on my list that are left. I wanted to talk to you quickly about wiring and running wires. Some tools that you can use to make everything look really professional. First thing is wire loom and having this in 3 or 4 different sizes so that you can do different bundles of wires. This will really make a difference. Electrical tape, obviously. One of the things I like to do on the wire loom is every 18 inches or so, just put a loop of electrical tape to seal that up so it doesn't start to come through. Zip ties, obviously I have a few zip ties, a lot of white ones in here, so I'm not using those on this project because I don't like how that looks. I've got various sizes of black, and so before you start any of these jobs, make sure you have plenty of those available. I've got these clips. Basically these are padded holders that you can attach to the frame, attach to the body. That'll secure the wiring, because the most important thing is to keep the wiring out of all moving parts, anything that'll melt, anything like that. One of the tricks that I like to use is there's brake lines running all up and down the frame of these vehicles. That's a great place to secure your wires because they don't move. They're usually bent right next to the frame, so that helps to align those things. And so find places that don't move, secure your wiring that way. And so today I'm going to be working on some switches. I've basically got everything run. I need to run a couple more wires for our Monet Rally computer. We're switching from a Terra Trip, at least that's the plan. We're supposed to have the sensors later today. And so I'm going to run all the switches. I have to wire in some, the Whistler, we have the radar detector, that's going to be in SEMA, can't use it during the rally obviously. We have the dash cam that's going in, which is a really cool thing. We're putting a scanner in, which also won't be used in the rally, but it will be at SEMA. So I've got to put the mount in and all that stuff for that. Everything gets hardwired into the vehicle. I ran the wiring for the inverter last night, which is basically 4-gauge wire all the way from the battery to the cab, to the rear of the Jeep. So that worked out very well. Got everything fixed up last night, some of my to-do lists, and here we go. Another thing that you can use to make everything look good and also protect the circuits and protect all of your connections is to use this shrink tubing. It comes in various sizes. I actually have a kit that has a bunch of different sizes. So that'll help you secure everything. Basically, every connection that you make, put shrink tubing on it, heat it up, and it seals around it. And it also looks good. One of the more challenging parts of adding wiring and accessories to an existing vehicle is how do you get from the engine bay into the cab? And because we need to run most connections directly to the battery, because inside you've got bus systems, you've got all sorts of different things that are specifically sized for that amperage, and you start adding a bunch of big circuits to that and you'll end up blowing fuses, which is never a good thing. On the Jeep TJ in particular, there is a really pretty nice access hole that is bolted in just to the outboard side of the brake booster. And so there are 2 nuts inside, pull those off. It was pretty sealed, so I popped that off. But now I have a bundle of wires that's going through that's about that big. I'll show you where it is on the close-up. And so then what I can do is I can actually use this again, drill it out, or just seal that hole and the other holes with some expandable foam to make sure that liquid doesn't get inside the vehicle. So that gives us a nice hole without having to drill a firewall or anything like that. So a little tip for you guys that own a TJ. Look for those also in other vehicles. Most of the time you've got a big bundle of wires that has a big rubber grommet on it, and many times there's an inch or so that you can access that you can actually drill through, cut through, and that gives you access into the cab as well. Hey there, it's been an eventful day. It's 11:50 right now, p.m. and not quite done. Still need to put the console in. Got all the wiring done. Need to tie up some wiring underneath the dash. I'll show you some shots of the interior when we do the reveal, but I've got the radio in, got the switch panel in, I've got all the lights in, and everything is working great. Had some issues with the stereo and how it went in. I actually ended up having to cut out. There's a panel on the inside of these that ramps up. Basically, Chrysler/Jeep decided they never ever wanted another radio in this vehicle. So the only way I could get it out was basically cut it and use my soldering iron, an old soldering iron, to melt that out and get rid of that. So I got rid of everything out of the back. I've got pretty much everything wired in, like I said before, and still need to wire the rear license plate lights. We've got a few little things that we need to do here and there. My goal is to try to get this thing finished before I go to bed tonight. So I got to take the seat out, put the console in, and then button up the wires on the inside, do the license plate lights, and then I should be pretty good to go. And so we'll check back in a bit. Well, it's almost 3 o'clock in the morning and I just finished all the wiring, putting things away, getting everything vacuumed, seats back in, console is in, and basically I have just a couple of things left to do. Basically put the license plates on and wire a license plate light in the back, and that'll be it. We have to clean it in the morning. We're going to do some video for the reveal and then get ready for our trip on Monday. So try to get a few hours sleep here, but we will see you tomorrow. One little thing to leave with you. There's some rock lights. Pretty cool lights.
Well, we finally made it to the last day. It has been a couple of long and tiring weeks for us, but we are here. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, at least for Kevin, I guess, because I have to start the rally at this point. But we still got just a few minor details we're finishing up today because we head out tomorrow. So one of those details is installing the fire extinguisher, and the rally requirements are actually higher than your standard like 1 or 2 pound auto fire extinguisher. So we have a bigger extinguisher right here, and I've got a mount that I'm going to mount onto the roll bar so that we can easily grab it if need be. Alright, we're going to finish up now by putting her license tag on.
Going through the desert is going to be pretty rough on this vehicle, and so thanks to Opti-Coat, we have Opti-Coat Pro that we're using here on this wrap. And so even though it's a wrap and it's matte, Opti-Coat is perfect for this application. It'll give it some extra protection, and in particular UV protection, because here in Montana we're at altitude, 4,500 feet or so. And so things like wrap and fences and decks and all that stuff just get beaten. So the lifespan of this won't be very long, so we want to make sure that we protect it and get as much life out of it as we can. So Michelle's already done a little bit. She's got to do this hood, and so go to town.
Okay. Alright, I'm just going to finish up on the other side of the hood and get this whole thing coated.
Andrea and Michelle are going to be using these fabric storage seat covers, and so we're going to go ahead and protect those, keep the dirt and sand and all that stuff out of them. It's Opti-Guard fabric protectant, so we're going to coat these things and make sure that they stay clean.
It's been 2 months and I cannot believe the transformation that has occurred in this shop. It has been an awesome adventure for my husband and I have learned so much. It is kind of unbelievable actually. But I want to take you through a quick walkthrough around the vehicle and show you what all we've done to it. Starting at the back, we installed the rear fender flares from Poison Spider, as well as some Poison Spider rock sliders. We've got a TNT Highline fender and an AEV Highline hood. And we've got these awesome Nito mud grappler tires that we put on these Raceline bead-locker wheels. And the special color match was done by Chris Hopes over at Mars of Bozeman. He could not have gotten a more perfect match. The rear bumpers are from Barricade Bumpers, and we did a tailgate conversion from Swag Off-Road. This is going to make it a lot easier for Andrea and I to be able to hang out in the back and take some bearings. We've got this awesome display of LED lights by Black Oak LED mounted on some mounts made by Razor Auto. And Razor Auto also provided us with my favorite feature of this entire Jeep, which is the Angry Bird grille and the headlights. We've got a worn 8,000 pound winch, and that's mounted on the front bumper, which is also by Barricade. We needed some extra clearance for rock crawling, so we put in a 3-inch iron rock off-road lift, as well as some upgraded steering. Our build wasn't just cosmetic. We wanted to make sure that Sugar High would be ready for the rally. So we went through the whole engine, cleaned it all up, put in a whole new cooling system, new fuel injectors, new spark plugs, new cold air intake, and a new alternator. And we topped it all off with an Optima deep cell battery so that we have enough juice to power all those awesome lights. We also added an ARB air compressor so I can air up when I'm on the trail. We've got these awesome Mastercraft race seats, a custom switch panel by 12 Volt Unlimited, and WeatherTech floor mats by BillTheBuffman.com. To keep everything protected and still give it a rugged look, we put in Opti-Coat's Ultimate Bed Liner. To give it a personal touch, Azzy's Design created this awesome personal instrument cluster that has Sugar High's name on it. And to literally top off this entire bill, this gorgeous full body wrap was done by the wrap agency here in Bozeman. Now that we've got it all done, we want to keep Sugar High as protected as possible. And fortunately for us, Opti-Coat makes an incredible line of coatings and protective products. We're going to coat the glass and plastic with Opti-Lens. We'll cover the fabric with Opti-Guard fabric, and the entirety of the wrap is going to be coated in Opti-Coat Pro. We're so thankful to have Opti-Coat partner with us in this rally.